I knew it was over the moment Victoria didn't make eye contact. That fresh-faced venture capital favorite, straight off an Ivy League ego trip, sat across from me in the executive glass suite like I was a line item on a quarterly expense report that desperately needed trimming. She smelled of overpriced French perfume and ruthless corporate ambition. My name is Harlan Miller, 53 years old, and I had spent 28 long years at Techflow Dynamics writing the foundational encryption protocols that made our defense infrastructure worth $750 million to the Department of Defense. Now, I was being realigned right out the back door. Her first words weren't a polite greeting or an expression of gratitude for nearly 3 decades of dedicated service. Instead, she smoothed down her pristine tailored suit jacket, leaned back in her ergonomic leather chair, and spoke with cold, calculated precision about corporate alignment, operational streamlining, and agile synergy. Optimization was the favorite buzzword she kept repeating like a mechanical mantra. I had spent 28 years building the military-grade encryption systems that protected secure government communications, routing encrypted data packets across hostile intelligence networks with zero latency and absolute cryptographic integrity. And now, this 32-year-old executive was optimizing me straight into unemployment. She flipped open my annual review folder like it was a cheap takeout menu, barely glancing at the glowing performance metrics that had sustained Techflow through 3 major economic recessions and multiple defense audit reviews. "Look, Harlan, you have done solid, steady work here over the years," she said, offering a practiced executive smile that never once reached her cold, calculating eyes. "Really, everyone recognizes that you are a legacy pillar of this organization, but the board of directors has tasked me with driving a complete structural transformation. We need forward-thinking leaders who are nimble, cross-functional, and fully integrated into our new digital paradigm. If you are not comfortable with our streamlined direction, the door is right there." You know the exact type of corporate climber she represented. A fresh Master of Business Administration credential from a top-tier business school, zero hands-on software engineering experience, believing that effective executive leadership meant reciting hollow buzzwords like strategic leverage, enterprise scalability, and paradigm shifts during glossy boardroom slide presentations. Victoria Brooks was 32 years old and had never written a single line of functional executable code in her life. Yet here she sat, armed with her father's venture capital connections and a mandate from the board, treating the master architect of the firm's entire technological ecosystem like disposable corporate overhead. A deep, steady calm settled over me as I listened to her canned termination speech. On the corner of my polished mahogany desk sat a framed photograph from August of 2008, showing 6 tired, disheveled engineers standing outside our original brick warehouse in Arlington. Half of those engineers had been hired directly out of university computer science programs on my personal recommendation. I remembered staying awake for 48 consecutive hours alongside those young developers during critical tactical system deployments, surviving on lukewarm diner coffee, lukewarm energy drinks, and stale vending machine sandwiches. I remembered missing my daughter's high school graduation ceremony because our primary Pentagon server farm experienced a critical hardware failure during an active military exercise overseas, requiring my immediate hands-on architectural intervention to prevent a catastrophic network blackout. I remembered standing up to upper executive management when they attempted to slash engineering department salaries to pad their annual performance bonuses. I had sacrificed my weekends, my health, and precious family moments to ensure that every cryptographic key generated by Techflow was mathematically unbreakable. Now, this child of corporate privilege was handing me a standardized severance release agreement and a realigned departure folder. I did not raise my voice. I did not engage in pointless emotional arguments or deliver dramatic farewell speeches. I simply leaned forward, gently closed my high-performance workstation laptop, tucked the official departure folder neatly under my arm, and stood up from my chair with quiet, unwavering dignity. I looked Victoria straight in the eye for 3 long seconds. She shifted uncomfortably in her chair, momentarily unnerved by the total absence of panic or anger in my expression. I walked past my engineering team, past the glass-walled conference room, where senior project managers suddenly looked down at their tablet screens to avoid direct eye contact, and past the human resources director who had asked me 2 months prior to mentor her incoming nephew. No one said a single word. That kind of corporate silence carries an incredible weight. It pulls everything down with it: loyalty, professional history, mutual respect, and decades of shared sacrifice. But what modern corporate executives consistently fail to understand about senior system architects like me is that quiet silence is often a deliberate, strategic maneuver. I did not rush home in an emotional frenzy or unleash angry rants on professional networking platforms. I walked down the quiet avenue to Murphy's Diner, a long-standing local establishment with faded red vinyl booths and black coffee strong enough to wake the dead. I sat in the corner booth, ordered a fresh cup of coffee, and simply breathed. TechFlow Dynamics had been my entire adult professional career. I had joined the enterprise when we were operating out of a cramped, drafty facility in Arlington, back when defense contracting was driven by veteran engineers who understood operational security, mathematical precision, and raw technical integrity. I had watched the firm expand from a scrappy 20-person shop into a massive defense favorite, commanding $750 million in enterprise valuation. Every core protocol, every cryptographic handshake, and every data validation algorithm had my direct architectural blueprint buried deep within its foundational codebase. I had not documented every internal systemic variable in standard corporate manuals because I lived that architecture every single day. The core logic resided in my mind, forged through years of midnight debugging sessions and impossible government delivery deadlines. Under Title 29 of the United States Code, Section 2101, commonly known as the Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification Act, large defense employers are typically required to provide advance written notice during major workforce restructuring. Victoria had bypassed proper corporate legal review to execute a swift cost-cutting maneuver, assuming an aging veteran engineer would accept a quiet payout, sign away his claims, and fade quietly into suburban retirement. She truly believed that my departure marked the end of an era, unaware that she had just initiated a chain reaction that would tear down her corporate pedestal. I finished my coffee at Murphy's Diner, watching the urban traffic move past the window. Years of quiet dedication had taught me that emotional reactions in business solve nothing. True leverage comes from preparation, documentation, and an absolute understanding of legal reality. I paid the diner waitress in cash, stepped out into the crisp afternoon air, and hailed a traditional yellow taxicab instead of relying on a rideshare mobile app, feeling a quiet, nostalgic comfort in the familiar mechanical rumble of the vehicle. When I arrived home, the house smelled of old leather books and dog food. My golden retriever, Rex, trotted out from the living room, wagging his tail with cautious affection. Animals possess an innate, remarkable ability to sense when something fundamental has shifted in their owner's world. I placed the official termination folder on the kitchen table, poured myself 3 fingers of high-proof Kentucky bourbon in a heavy crystal glass, and opened a locked steel desk drawer in my private study that had remained undisturbed for over 16 years, deep beneath old tax filings, property deeds, and expired equipment warranties lay a thick manila envelope. It bore no flashy corporate logos or marketing stamps, only the quiet weight of strategic foresight and procedural discipline. Inside rested the original provisional patent documentation, filed in August of 2008 during one of TechFlow's chaotic early corporate reorganizations. Back then, the executive leadership team was so consumed with surviving venture capital audit demands and securing initial Series B funding that they paid zero attention to intellectual property registry maintenance. At the direct advice of my longtime friend and former Navy legal officer, Chester Walsh, I had taken a critical precautionary step. Chester had sat with me over craft beers in Arlington 16 years ago and issued a clear warning about corporate volatility. "Harlan," he had said, "file the core provisional patent application under your own personal name as sole inventor. You can always execute a formal corporate assignment deed later once the company stabilizes its management and cuts you a proper equity ownership stake. The company prospered tremendously. But executive management never stabilized its corporate ethics, and they certainly never remembered to execute the formal legal assignment of rights with the Federal Patent Office. TechFlow had been licensing and deploying my core encryption framework across all major defense contracts for over 16 years under a temporary operational agreement. That temporary license contained a very specific, ironclad legal condition drafted by Chester, buried deep within the fine print like a landmine with a 16-year fuse. Pursuant to Title 35 of the United States Code, Section 261, which strictly governs the assignment, ownership, and recordation of patent rights. The agreement specified that in the event of involuntary termination without cause, full ownership and absolute reversion of all patent rights would trigger automatically within 24 hours of official notice. Furthermore, under standard principles of contract law and federal trade secret protections, under Title 18 of the United States Code, Section 1836, commonly known as the Defend Trade Secrets Act, proprietary rights retained by an inventor do not automatically transfer to an employer without explicit signed written assignment deeds recorded with the Patent Office. No executive at TechFlow had ever audited the legacy intellectual property vault because everyone blindly assumed Harlan Miller was a permanent corporate fixture, the reliable old workhorse who kept the defense server infrastructure running smoothly while executive officers played corporate musical chairs in the boardroom. Victoria Brooks had just pulled the pin on that dormant tripwire. In defense system engineering, you are trained to analyze operational threats calmly and methodically. You do not react with emotional outbursts. You systematically evaluate strategic assets, assess legal vulnerabilities, and execute countermeasures with surgical precision. As I sat at my kitchen table sipping bourbon with Rex resting quietly at my feet, my mobile phone vibrated repeatedly with incoming text messages. Junior developers and senior system managers were reaching out, attempting to figure out why the master architect was suddenly ushered out of the building. Messages flooded in asking if I was taking medical leave, if management was restructuring the department, or if there had been a disagreement over project roadmaps. I did not respond to a single message. Let corporate management navigate the mounting silence. They had all sat passively in that executive conference room while Victoria executed her reckless cost-cutting mandate. What Victoria and her advisory board failed to comprehend was that I was not merely an employee departing with a box of personal office supplies. I was the master architect walking away from a massive digital fortress to which I still held the exclusive legal title. By 6 o'clock the following morning, I was sitting at my home workstation, reviewing the verified USPTO electronic registry portal. I dialed Chester Walsh's private office line in Denver. He answered on the first ring, his voice calm, measured, and deliberate. Is the legal reversion clause fully operational? Chester? I asked softly into the headset receiver. I heard the quiet rustle of legal documents over the speakerphone as Chester reviewed the original notary stamps and federal filing receipts from August of 2008. Harlan, he replied. The language is absolute and unchallengeable. Because TechFlow never executed a final corporate assignment deed recorded with the Patent Office, and because your termination yesterday afternoon was executed strictly without cause, reversion of patent number 8472639 triggered automatically at 4:15 yesterday. By 7:45 that morning, I completed the formal digital submission on the USPTO online portal, attaching the certified termination letter signed by Victoria Brooks alongside the original provisional agreement terms. A digital receipt pinged on my monitor screen moments later. Ownership of the crown jewel encryption algorithm, powering TechFlow's entire defense portfolio, had officially reverted to Harlan Miller. Every server network, every satellite data link, and every tactical software build scheduled for their upcoming high-stakes defense demonstration was now operating on intellectual property, owned exclusively by a private citizen. I leaned back in my ergonomic desk chair, holding my coffee mug, and watched the morning sun rise over the suburban horizon. The trap was set, legally sealed under federal intellectual property statutes, and ticking quietly in the corporate background, Rex rested his head on my knee as I closed the USPTO filing window. The electronic notification was silent, but its legal impact was total. In the high-stakes world of defense contracting, quiet precision always outlasts corporate arrogance. While I sat in my kitchen enjoying a peaceful breakfast, Victoria Brooks was opening TechFlow's morning executive briefing with typical high-energy corporate flair. According to detailed internal reports from former engineering colleagues, she strutted into the main auditorium, beaming with self-assurance, projecting high quarterly growth projections onto the high-definition LED displays. She spoke passionately about agile pivots, operational efficiency, and fourth-quarter revenue targets. The primary focus of her presentation was the upcoming live demonstration for Senior Department of Defense procurement officials, scheduled for Wednesday afternoon. That live demonstration represented the absolute culmination of a $750 million defense contract renewal. Every security protocol, every automated data pipeline, and every cryptographic validation layer in that tactical platform relied entirely on the core algorithm I had engineered during the 2008 financial crisis. Yet not a single corporate officer or corporate attorney in that room had bothered to check the USPTO public registry database that morning. They were moving digital components across internal repositories like reckless children playing with high explosives, completely oblivious to the fact that their entire legal foundation had collapsed beneath their feet. At 11:30 that morning, my mobile phone buzzed with an incoming call from Clifford Owens, a lead systems engineer who had worked under my direct supervision for 9 years. "Hey, Harlan," Clifford began, his tone hesitant, strained, and visibly uncomfortable. "I just wanted to check in with you. Management is migrating your legacy core modules into the new production distribution build for tomorrow's Pentagon review. Things feel very strange around the department without you here. Everyone is wondering how we are supposed to handle live system updates thus without your oversight." I took a slow sip of black coffee and replied with complete composure, "Good luck with the build, Clifford." He paused, confusion evident in his prolonged silence. "Wait, Harlan, what does that mean? Are you saying there is a bug in the build?" I simply hung up the phone without further elaboration. The real structural trouble began in TechFlow's legal compliance division at 2 o'clock that afternoon. A junior legal analyst had been assigned to perform a routine trademark and patent verification sweep ahead of the Pentagon demonstration. Standard corporate compliance procedure required checking active patent serial numbers to ensure all client promotional documentation was formatted correctly. When the analyst typed patent number 8472639 into the federal database, his screen did not display TechFlow Dynamics LLC as the current assignee. Instead, the verified owner field displayed Harlan Miller, with an effective reversion timestamp recorded at 4:15 p.m. the previous day. The analyst reportedly froze in total disbelief, refreshed his browser window multiple times, and immediately escalated the official record to the general counsel's desk. The senior legal team gathered around the executive monitor, pulling the archived 2008 licensing agreement from their dark storage servers. When they read the explicit reversion clause linked to involuntary termination without cause, under Title 35 of the United States Code, Section 261, severe panic erupted throughout the executive suite. Furthermore, continuing to operate, demonstrate, or commercialize software built upon unauthorized intellectual property constituted willful patent infringement under Title 35 U.S.C. Section 271. Under established United States patent law precedents, proven willful infringement exposes a corporate violator to severe treble damages under Section 284, potentially multiplying financial liabilities by 3 times the total commercial value of the underlying defense contracts. If TechFlow proceeded to execute a public government demonstration using my proprietary algorithms, they would be knowingly committing federal patent infringement on a massive corporate scale. When the General Counsel presented these alarming findings to Victoria Brooks, her initial reaction was pure executive arrogance. She laughed off the stern warning, dismissing the official reversion notice as a trivial administrative mistake or a desperate bluff by a bitter ex-employee. "Look at him," Victoria reportedly sneered during the legal briefing. "He is an old engineer sitting at home with his dog. You think he is going to sue a $750 million defense contractor? We own that code because he wrote it while on our payroll." She ignored the fundamental legal reality that without a recorded assignment deed under federal patent law, employment alone does not confer patent ownership. She ordered the legal team to remain completely silent, insisting that the high-stakes Pentagon demonstration must proceed exactly as scheduled so she could secure her lucrative performance incentives. She genuinely believed she could optimize an aging veteran engineer out of the organization while quietly commandeering his proprietary intellectual property. Meanwhile, the legal compliance team began quietly drafting an urgent risk mitigation memorandum. The official document recommended an immediate postponement of the government demo until intellectual property ownership could be formally clarified with Harlan Miller. However, Victoria suppressed the internal memorandum, terrified that revealing the legal crisis to the board of directors would permanently destroy her corporate standing. She chose to gamble the entire future of the company on a desperate lie, hoping that she could force through the military demonstration before anyone realized that the technology belonged to me. The clock continued to tick, and the corporate storm gathered massive strength. As night fell over the city, TechFlow's corporate lights remained on, but the shadow hanging over their executive suite was growing darker by the hour. A company built on borrowed technology can only pretend to prosper until the rightful owner demands an accounting. The critical breaking point arrived at 6:30 the following morning. Retired General Walter Vance, the founding chairman of TechFlow Dynamics, who had stepped away from daily operations years ago to live on his Montana estate, called my private line. Walter was an old-school defense industry leader who understood technical capability, operational honor, and personal integrity. He did not care for corporate buzzwords or venture capital posturing, which made it all the more disappointing that he had permitted corporate climbers like Victoria to run the enterprise. "Harlan." Walter's booming voice rang out over the speakerphone, heavy with deep frustration. "I just received an automated security alert from Federal Patent Tracking. Why is patent number 8472639 listed under your personal name?" I explained the entire operational situation with complete clarity. I detailed how Victoria had terminated my employment without cause to meet short-term cost reduction targets, automatically triggering the 16-year-old legal reversion clause under Title 35 U.S.C. Section 261. Walter went completely silent for several tense seconds. When he finally spoke, his voice was dark and ominous. "They terminated you without reviewing the intellectual property register." He hung up the phone without another word and boarded his private aircraft immediately. 3 hours later, General Vance walked into TechFlow corporate headquarters like an impending storm, demanding an immediate accounting from the legal department. He confronted Victoria in her corner office, slamming his leather gloves onto her desk. "Have you lost your mind?" Walter growled. "You fired the author of our core patent without securing the assignment rights?" Victoria attempted to defend herself, claiming that Harlan was legacy overhead and that company lawyers would resolve any technical paperwork issues after the contract renewal. Walter stared at her with complete contempt. "Paperwork issues?" he barked. "That paperwork is federal patent law, you fool. You have placed our entire $750 million business in legal jeopardy." He ordered the legal team to prepare full documentation for the board while he attempted to limit the public fallout. By 2 o'clock Wednesday afternoon, TechFlow's Grand Demonstration Auditorium in downtown Washington was filled with top-ranking military officers, defense procurement directors, and industry executives. The auditorium stage featured brushed aluminum accents, custom blue theater lighting, and a 40-foot digital display wall flashing the company's new tagline, "Next Generation Encryption Dominance." Victoria Brooks stepped center stage dressed in a tailored Navy suit, radiating absolute self-confidence. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced smoothly into her lapel microphone, "today TechFlow Dynamics unveils the future of military communication security, driven by our proprietary, patent-protected core architecture, Behind her, the massive LED display wall loaded the live operational interface that I had designed line by line over 28 years. She began walking the distinguished audience through the real-time encryption protocols, boasting about the platform's impenetrable security matrix. But, just as she gestured toward the central data processing module, TechFlow's general counsel walked briskly onto the stage, accompanied by two senior legal compliance officers. The general counsel leaned close to Victoria and spoke in an urgent whisper that was partially captured by the sensitive lapel microphones. "Victoria, you must halt this presentation immediately. We do not own the underlying patent. Continuing this live transmission constitutes active federal infringement under Section 271. Victoria froze on stage, her face turning pale as she attempted to brush off the unexpected interruption with an awkward executive smile. "Ladies and gentlemen, please excuse this brief technical pause," she stammered into the microphone, stepping toward the stage wing. "What are you doing?" she demanded in a harsh whisper. "We own every single line of code in this facility." The general counsel handed her a freshly printed official document from the patent office. "No, Victoria, we do not. Harlan Miller executed his legal reversion rights yesterday afternoon. The patent is registered to him personally. If you transmit another encrypted packet using his algorithm, the firm faces immediate federal injunctions and severe treble damages under Section 284. At that exact moment, printed copies of the USPTO ownership filing and the explicit legal reversion clause were being distributed among the senior Pentagon officers in the audience. An anonymous internal source had delivered the public records directly to the procurement committee. A high-ranking Defense Department official stood up from the second row, holding the official document in his hand. "Ms. Brooks," the official said firmly, "your promotional materials claim this platform is backed by exclusive corporate patent protection. Federal records indicate the underlying architecture belongs entirely to an individual named Harlan Miller. Can you explain this discrepancy?" Victoria opened her mouth to speak, but no coherent explanation came out. She babbled incoherently about strategic roadmaps, temporary administrative delays, and ongoing corporate alignment, but the military delegation was already standing up. The procurement directors closed their official notebooks, packed their leather folders, and walked out of the auditorium in total silence. The grand launch had collapsed into a complete corporate disaster, and TechFlow's flagship contract was shattered in front of their most important military clients. Outside the Washington Auditorium, news of the ruined demonstration spread rapidly across defense industry channels. Victoria Brooks had sought personal glory, but she had delivered total corporate devastation. I woke up the following morning to complete tranquility at my suburban residence. While Rex rested peacefully on the warm living room rug, my mobile phone was practically overheating on the nightstand. 203 missed calls had accumulated overnight, alongside dozens of urgent text messages, executive emails, and frantic voicemails from corporate board members. I let the phone ring continuously while I brewed a fresh pot of dark roast coffee and prepared a quiet breakfast. At 8:30, I returned General Walter Vance's private call. "Harlan," Walter said immediately, his voice stripped of all corporate posturing and administrative defense. "I am sitting in an emergency executive session with the board of directors. The Department of Defense has frozen all our contract renewals until this intellectual property dispute is fully resolved. What are your exact terms to fix this catastrophic collapse?" I did not raise my voice, nor did I express personal anger or emotional triumphalism. I simply opened a pre-drafted legal document prepared by Chester Walsh and read my non-negotiable terms directly over the phone line. First, TechFlow Dynamics will execute a formal exclusive licensing agreement for patent number 8472639. Second, TechFlow will pay an immediate upfront licensing fee of $15 million, accompanied by a 12% ongoing royalty on all gross revenues generated from defense contracts utilizing my core architecture. Third, I will be granted a permanent seat on the board of directors with full voting privileges to oversee technical governance and software integrity. Fourth, The enterprise will issue an official public press release acknowledging my foundational authorship of the core encryption framework. And fifth, Victoria Brooks must be immediately removed from her position as Chief Executive Officer due to gross executive negligence, breach of fiduciary duty, and reckless disregard for corporate assets under federal corporate governance standards. Walter listened to every single requirement without interrupting me once. He took a deep, heavy breath and said softly, "Is there any room for negotiation on the royalty percentage or the executive resignation, Harlan?" "None whatsoever." "Walter," I replied with unwavering calm, "this is not personal revenge. This is proper corporate realignment. Under United States legal precedents governing intellectual property and corporate fiduciary responsibility, board members must protect shareholder value from reckless executive misconduct. If these terms are not accepted in writing by 5 o'clock today, my legal counsel will file an immediate motion in federal district court for an emergency injunction to halt all unauthorized usage of my core algorithm." By 4:15 that afternoon, a signed legal agreement arrived in my electronic inbox, bearing the official signatures of General Walter Vance and every voting member of TechFlow's board of directors. All 5 terms had been accepted without a single modification. The $15 million upfront licensing fee was wired directly to my corporate escrow account within 24 hours. That evening, internal company announcements confirmed that Victoria Brooks had resigned from her executive role effective immediately, stripped of all her unvested stock options and annual performance bonuses due to catastrophic failure of legal oversight and corporate governance. The following Monday morning, I returned to TechFlow Dynamics headquarters. I did not return as an overworked engineering employee sitting in a cramped cubicle. I arrived as an independent board member and the sole intellectual property owner of the enterprise's foundational technology. As I walked through the main lobby glass entrance, veteran software engineers and operations staff members nodded in silent, deep respect. Clifford Owens smiled warmly as I passed his desk, mouthing a quiet welcome back. I stepped into the top-floor executive boardroom, sat at the head of the mahogany conference table, and opened my workstation laptop. For 28 years, I had quietly built the technological foundation that sustained a $750 million defense empire, while arrogant executives assumed I was disposable. They learned the hard way that when you attempt to optimize out the master architect, you had better make sure you actually own the blueprints. Sitting on my back deck later that evening with a glass of bourbon, I watched the evening stars appear above the tree line. Justice in the corporate arena is rarely swift, but when grounded in truth and law, its execution is absolute.